The Islamists claim that if you have Khilafah, everything will be great. You just reestablish the Khilafah, you implement Sharia, whatever that means. They never really specify because they can't. They say that if we have those things, we have Khilafah, we have Sharia, everything's going to be wonderful. We can dictate our terms to the world. We'll be free, we'll be independent. Everything will be just and righteous and so on and so on and so on. Okay. Well, here's the thing. We had that. We had the Khilafah, and it did not prevent colonialism from taking over our lands. It didn't prevent our economic subjugation. It didn't prevent our internal divisions. That didn't help us. So clearly there are a lot of other problems, a lot of other challenges to establishing government, to establishing a state, to running a state, and to organizing the affairs of the society, other than calling your government Khilafah and other than implementing Sharia. Now I know that there's, plenty of brothers and sisters out there who will claim that it is blasphemous to say that it is not enough to organize the society successfully, but this is the truth. There are many, 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 many other things that you need in order to successfully run the society, in order to successfully run a state. That's simply not enough. It wasn't enough in the past, and this is the thing that the Islamists don't want to talk about. They don't want to tell you that. They want you to think that when we had the Khilafah, when we had the Sharia, everything was wonderful. And what they failed to mention is that it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough then, and it isn't enough now, and it won't be enough in the future. I mean, it's always going to come down to human understanding and implementation. Like I've talked about before, in the Ottoman Empire, you had the Sharia and you had Qanun, because the Sharia does not cover every issue. So they understood correctly that you do have to come up with some other types of legislation in order to run a state. It's tremendously dangerous to make the claim or to make a promise that the problem of corruption in government, the problem of injustice or the problem of oppression in government is that it is not the right form of government. And if we just have a different form of government and we have a government that we call Khilafah, then therefore all of the problems will be solved. No, the problem of corruption is always going to be there. The problem of injustice is always going to be there. The problem of oppression is always going to be there. It always was there for the last 1,400 years under what was called Islamic government, under what was called Khilafah, under the Ottoman Empire and before and before and before. So I mean, like the entirety of our history, except for 30 years, we have dealt with oppression, we have dealt with injustice, we have dealt with corruption under what was, according to everyone's, consensus, Islamic government. I mean, we have to come to terms with the fact that a government can be, according to the legal definition, Islamic and also oppressive. It can be the legal definition of Islamic, and it can also be unjust. It can also be corrupt, because that is what we have had. The correct position for anyone who wants to see the society and the government become more Islamic, become more aligned with Islamic law, Islamic values, and the objectives of the Sharia, then the role of those people is to just be in a continuous struggle to make whatever the government is better. Islamic is being used as a synonym for perfect. It's like, well, maybe in the Ottoman Empire they weren't doing it completely or correctly or rightly. Or in other words, maybe it just wasn't perfect. Well, no, it wasn't perfect. It was Islamic, but it wasn't perfect, because those two things don't mean the same thing. Yes, maybe they did implement things incompletely. Maybe they did implement things imperfectly. Of course they did. Anyone will. And anyone who is claiming that they can implement it perfectly is a liar. And this is sort of the fundamental, at least implicit claim of the Islamists. Overthrow the current regime, whatever current regime it is, overthrow that regime, and then put us in power, and then we will establish an Islamic government, which by definition must mean that it's a perfect, just, and righteous government. Well, that's a lie. Anyone who believes that, they're a fool, and they're being manipulated, and they are going down an extremely dangerous path. I'm speaking as someone who, ever since I became a Muslim, was for a very long time one of the people who believed in the idea of, that it was like wajib for us to reestablish the Khilafah without ever actually bothering to look into what that even means. And whether or not, in actual legal definition, whether or not the governments that we have are or are not Islamic. Because of course the Islamists will say any government that we ourselves and our party is not running is by definition un-Islamic. Or any government that is imperfect, any government that has oppression, any government that has injustice, any government that has corruption is by definition un-Islamic. No, that's not true by the legal definition. If that was true, then you would have to concede that we have not had any form of Islamic government since the abdication of Hassan bin Ali, because we have always had, with rare periods of exception, we have always had corruption, we have always had injustice, we have always had oppression. I mean, the number of just, fair, righteous rulers that we have had as an ummah for the last 1,400 years are notable precisely because they were so rare. I mean, the history of the Khilafah is a bloodbath. I mean, how can you explain, for example, all of the almost down the list of the most eminent scholars in Islamic history were in prison? That was under Islamic government. Any government, in order for it to be righteous or to be more righteous, to be less unjust, to be less oppressive, that's going to take a continuous struggle and a continuous effort on the part of the people, as has always been the case in Islamic history. Your real role is not to try to seize power. Your real role is not to try to take down a government. Your real role is what it has always been, which is to speak truth to power and to try, through practical ways, within your sphere of influence, to make things better, to make things more fair, to make things more just, to make things less corrupt. Because that's what we all really mean when you talk about Islamic government. It means what we all generally actually mean is we want governments that are better. We want governments that are fairer. We want governments that treat their people more decently. And another key point that most people mean when they talk about Islamic government, we want independence. We want to actually have sovereignty. We want to actually be able to make the decisions for our own society. So if you want to be useful, then you have to pinpoint the exact things that are, as you see them, contradictory to Islam. Prove that they are contradictory to Islam, either to the Sharia itself or that contradict, fundamental Islamic values. Find the things that are undermining those principles and those values, and work to change those things. And whatever your government is, whatever form your government takes, there is no statement from Rasulullah ﷺ that says that you have to establish the Khilafah. Even when he used the word Khilafah, it was not in reference to a political system that was articulated and organized and defined. When Rasulullah ﷺ referred to Khilafah, he was referring, it was the linguistic meaning of the word, meaning just whatever system of authority, whatever system of government, whatever system of rule came after him. Only later did we start to call, transform the word Khilafah from its linguistic meaning into a political term, because there is no political system in Islam. There are specific rules, and any system that either does implement those rules or genuinely, sincerely aspires to or articulates its commitment to implement those rules is an Islamic system. So you have to be adaptable and you have to be realistic and do what the righteous believers have always done throughout all of Islamic history, which is to just struggle to try to make things better. Jazakum Allahu khairan wa assalamu alaikum.